there are 12 primary concepts in A Course in Miracles. Now, technically, there's more than 12 concepts in the Course, but 12 primary ones, at least as it was shown to me. We will use the book, The Heart of A Course in Miracles, as a bit of a guide, but we'll read from that, and then the way I am, if you're not familiar with me, well, if you're not familiar, you might not be watching this, but if you're familiar with me, I tend to just kind of take off on who God knows what tangents. A conversation about this and that, tying things together, going very deep onto this and that, talking about how these things personally apply in our lives and so on. So I go into all kinds of other things, but the book will be a guideline. You don't have to own the book, because I'll be reading some excerpts and then freelancing from there. So you don't even have to own the book, which is a terrible version of a sales pitch, but you don't have to have the book, if funds were limited. I will say this about the book. The original version had an extra little section in the back related to Revelation, because the concept of the book of Revelation of St. John and the end of the Bible is not unlike the A Course in Miracles that starts talking about Revelation early on, but then disappears for a while, and then at the end of the text brings us back to something like called the final vision and so forth. When it's addressing, when we're done with our lessons, God starts to be seen or experienced by us again, and that's like having a revelation. We think of the book of Revelation as being this guy's surreal, bizarro, sci-fi, and scary experiences that he writes down about the end of the world by most people's interpretation, when in fact it's a description of the revealing of his inner stuff coming out. That's why you have all these bizarre symbols, locusts coming from the bottomless pit, and portion of mankind being wiped out. It's all about metaphors and symbols of his describing, because the Revelation has two parts. Those of you who did the Revelation course know this, but the Revelation has two parts. All versions of real Revelation have two parts. Us revealing our illusions being revealed to us, our broken self, wounded self, etc., has to be revealed, which is why all the creepy things in the book of Revelation. And then the book of Revelation ends with a union with God, which is the revealing of God to us or with us. So that's why it has two parts. Now, A Course in Miracles version of Revelation is not in form the same as you find in the book of Revelation, but in content it is. In content it means that the details may not match, but the concepts do, which is God being revealed to us again. All right, so in the first edition, I put material on Revelation at the end, the last chapter in the book. That's no longer in there. So if you have an old version, there's edits anyway. So you might want the new version just so you can read along more easily. But 90% of it, if you read it before with me or worked with it before, would be maybe the same. Not counting the Revelation being taken out. Just other little things that I changed in there and altered in an editing process. But I did remove the Revelation portion. If somebody's like, I would really like that original edition, there are literally only a few. Somebody's got them back in Florida. Somebody's got them stashed in a box. They can probably, auction them on eBay and make something out of it, if that's what they want to do. I have one here. If for some reason somebody feels they want that version, you're welcome to have it, but it's here. One. All right? The ones we carry in the bookstore and the ones I have in my storage, for sales and so forth, they're all the new edition. All right? The others are pretty much gone. So that's your call. It gives you some really extra, some cool things, but at the same time, for some people, I think it's so deep and whatever, complicated, or in some ways complex, not complicated. It might be too much. But in this course, it's nice because we're not addressing that Revelation topic so much. We're talking about the 12 concepts, so we'll stick to it and do 12 weeks. This is a free intro to the course. It's very important, like with most of the things I do like this, presentations. I've never been inclined to be the type of person to be a sales pitch type of guy. So I don't say, welcome Tonight, let me tell you what you're not going to hear tonight, so that you sign up for the course so that you will hear it. I understand all the hooks and necessities of sales, but that's not my thing. So I want tonight to stand alone. What we're going to do then is cover whatever comes up, but also cover what's in the intro parts of the book. That way we're making some headway through the book. I don't remember if it's in the intro, probably not, but a short story of how this came about, this material. A Course in Miracles is incredible material. It's in the top few most enlightened books of all time. I mean, it's so, because of how much Christ consciousness is in it. Now, people write books, and they might have an interesting quote now and again. A really wise statement. An intriguing sentence. That's different. When a book is written from cover to cover, every sentence completely intentional and conscious, that's really out there. You don't find that. Even the Bible didn't pull that off. I mean, it has lots of stuff, but there's lots of human stuff in there too. So A Course in Miracles really pulls off this cover to cover, Christ consciousness. There are other books that have a good amount of that, and those are typically the books I really admire most, the ones that have what I call a Christy feeling to them. Isn't there a song, "Oh, that Christy feeling has me in its spell"? No, I'm kidding. So, So A Course in Miracles is profound, but this is not for course students exclusively. Every course student, every student of A Course in Miracles should be in this course and should take this course, should read the book, because, oh my God, I really believe that it takes you to a whole new level of understanding the course. Because A Course in Miracles does something called, which most people don't realize it, hundreds and hundreds of pages there, it summarizes things. Now, most people wouldn't think so. They would go, why is Michael summarizing A Course in Miracles, 1,000 pages, down to 12 concepts? Who does he think he is? The Course actually endorses it. People that would complain about that just actually don't know the Course well enough to appreciate that I did it. How do I know the Course summarizes? Because it takes all its hundreds of pages and summarizes them in one opening paragraph. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. And you go, oh, that's kind of neat. No, you have to sit with that for a sec. That is powerful. And the book starts with that because it's summarizing everything. And it's, if you get this, you got it all. Nothing real can be threatened means you have absolutely nothing to worry about in any part of your life or this world. Because any part of you that's real can't die, can't ache, can't age. So nothing real can be threatened is a very powerful sentence by itself. But it says, and by the way, nothing unreal exists. Meaning it's kind of like the Buddhist concept. If you can't change a problem, then why worry about it? If it's hopeless, why spend time worrying? It's already hopeless. And if you can change it, why worry about it? See that? Either way, why get bent over it? Just all hell-bent and freaked out and just, let it go. So nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. And then it says, herein lies the peace of God. Meaning, if you get this, you're centered, you're peaceful, you're good. So it summarizes. And then it's like in the Bible, Jesus says, I've been teaching for a few years. Let me summarize my teachings in the concept of love. Love one another as I have loved you. Love God and one another. We're good. I have a feeling they're not going to get that. Okay, blessed are the meek. And he goes and gives you the Beatitudes. And then just write some dang Gospels, man. I don't know what else to do with these people. He does summarize in a quote. He does summarize in Beatitudes. And then there's the text, the book, his teachings, right? In A Course in Miracles, there's a paragraph. There's 50 principal miracles, which are like the 10, or the Beatitudes. There's the 50 principal miracles of A Course in Miracles. And then there's the book. Whether you want to go to the book, the 50 principal miracles, or that one quote. Whether you want to go to Jesus' Gospels, or you want to go to the Beatitudes, or you want to go to one concept, love one another. It depends how much you want it summarized. To me, all of it has relevance and goodness to it. But don't tell me that summarizing doesn't exist. It's a major concept of God's way of teaching mankind, is to not just go on and on ad nauseum with words or whatever and typed pages in books. It's when we get it, when we learn, when you integrate something you've learned, you know what you're actually doing? You're summarizing it. God, I went through 50 years marriage and this and that and a 5-year divorce. I went to school and I studied. Do you sit and quote every word out of every professor's mouth after of every college class to tell somebody what you learned in college? No. You summarize it. The only way you can summarize something is that you've kind of gotten it on some level. Now you're able to feed it back on some level. That's a good, healthy version of integration. Got it? Worked it? Here's how you can simplify that. Not making complex. Simplifying. Simplifying, summarizing is more advanced than making complex. Humans are more impressed with people that make things complex. They'll go, this has to be true, because none of it makes any sense. It must be so profound, I'm going to have to spend years trying to listen to this and figure it out. And there's a quote in here about that, because Course in Miracles students have gone way out of their way to make A Course in Miracles overly complex. There's people out there who write books about it, analyzing, cross-referencing. There's people, some are their expertise is like, the word sin is found 348 times in A Course in Miracles. And then on and on about something else, and the word spirit is mentioned 8,523. It's their whole thing is calculating. It's analyzing. How is that growing corn? How is that helping anything today? How is it anything that's practical for me? Great. Now I know such and such is in there 800 times. How does that help me apply this in my life? So some teachers out there are more like almost theologians. They just love analyzing things and getting nowhere. I mean, they'd like to think they're getting something, but they're really not getting, because you can't analyze and get anywhere at the same time. As soon as you analyze, you push things apart, away from you. That's what science takes a frog, they cut up, they dissect it. Why? We want to understand the frog. But you're actually distancing yourself from it when you break it down and do what you're doing. That's called a negative version of divide and conquer. A positive version of divide and conquer says, this is a complex mess. It can't be healed. It looks like it's hopeless. But a positive divide and conquer says, really, let's look at that. Does this have power? Is this true? Is this here? Is this there? You find the connection of things. When you can't find the connection of pieces, it's a bit difficult to deal with. But positive divide and conquer means I'm going to find something that looks way too complicated and disjointed, and I'm going to try to bridge it, I call it. Bridge it. Asking healthy questions rather than just analytical questions. Healthy ones. Ones that, when the answers come, it puts pieces together. As opposed to, God, that even makes it more complicated. It puts pieces together. So summarizing and simplifying is stellar. Okay? Now, what happened is, knowing the Course as I know it, and, there's a point where you study something and you start to become it. I'm not claiming to be an expert on A Course in Miracles. I would even say there's maybe only one besides Jesus himself. The only person that deserves the title of like the expert of A Course in Miracles, Kenneth Wapnick. He was humble, he lived it. He was the editor, one of the editors, and he was part of the process of it. When Helen's receiving it, he was part of the process of getting the material together. He was there in prayer with them to come up with the subtitles and the chapter titles. I mean, it was an inspired process. He's one of the few there. A couple other passed away. Why am I naming him? A couple others passed away. One just sort of stepped out of the role of participating with it, and it left Kenneth Wapnick. But He was part of it spiritually. He had past life connections with Helen. He had past life connections with Jesus. He had deep devotionalism. This was a deep process for the guy. He wasn't an editor in his head. He was a participant in a very deep process, a meant-to-be process. But if you watch YouTube talks, he's not, I am channeling the spirit of A Course in Miracles, trying to woo-woo you. He's not, analyzing this page and that word and how many times. He's telling you what it means. People ask questions. Excuse me, Kenneth. The Course talks about, guilt and the role it plays on keeping us stuck in the illusion. Can you talk about that? He talks about it perfectly. I've never seen videos of his or the ones I've seen YouTube or seen his books now and again and said, oh, nothing there. It's deep, very deep. But one other reason was he was there in the trenches creating the Course. He knows it better than anybody, forward and backward. But he's a psychologist as well. And because the book is themed in spiritual psychology, he understands it. Now that's very important, because when I first came to the Course, I was looking at it spiritually. And I had really not a lot of respect for some of the other institutions in the world, like psychology, because it's a little dry and so forth. But Jesus decided psychology plays a part. So I had to acquiesce and say, well, if Jesus thinks it has a place, then let me just open my mind and add that piece. When I did that, instead of, no, let's let the Course, let's keep it a spiritual thing. Because I was a student of spirituality and a teacher of spirituality, that was my tendency. But you can't understand the Course without understanding psychology, because it is spiritual psychology. So there's terminology in the Course that if you don't know psychology, you're not going to understand what it's telling you. When it uses dissociation, it's a psychological term. When it's talking about guilt and shame and how projection, projection is a major concept in A Course in Miracles. How we take our inner stuff and project it on the world. Psychology knows all about transference and projection. But Jesus just takes it to a whole other level. Jesus is talking to Helen, who writes the Course, and he sits with her and talks to her personally at times while she's scribing this. She could be, handwriting and typing or whatever and making her notes, and Jesus is like, now let's continue where we left off yesterday. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and she's typing away. And then she'll go, well, wait a minute, I have a question. She could do that. I have a question. What you just said means this and that, but that's not what Freud teaches. And then Jesus would say, and Freud was wrong. Would you like to move on? No, I want to know what you mean. Who do you think you are? Freud was wrong. Oh, well, let me explain. Freud was brilliant on A, B, and C, but he tended to have an obsession on X, Y, and Z, and it didn't allow him to see clearly. He would just throw in these facts that you might go, that's judgmental. Yeah, no. It's true. That's all it is. There's not a judgment. It's just the truth. He said he actually missed it. He starts talking about the development of the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and so on. But he starts to say, the subconscious mind is thought to be something, and this is a very simplistic version of it. But he's like saying, the conscious mind is thought to be your outer self, which it is, and the subconscious is deeper and kind of almost less understood. But he's trying to say sub means deeper, and deeper should mean better. Not more hidden and less important. It should be what's most important. So he's going, Freud kind of made his list, but he got it all backwards. He's firing away on things that are just, you would have to know the world of psychology, Freud, and so on and so on and so on, to be able to comment on it the way he did so in such a first-handed way. And he talks to Helen about Edgar Cayce, which I've commented on many times in different talks. And I think that's really, really stellar, beautiful, because he's acknowledging the reality of metaphysics. You can't, if you think you're going to read A Course in Miracles analytically, you can't do it. You can only analyze it. You can't understand the Course without psychology and metaphysics, because it is metaphysical psychology, with a spiritual goal to it. So metaphysics is there. Metaphysics includes things like reincarnation. I've seen people write articles slamming anybody that believes in reincarnation if you're a Course in Miracles student. How could you believe in reincarnation if you're a Course in Miracles student? They act like they're all knowledgeable about it. But as more and more of the diary notes come out with Helen and Jesus, clearly he's talking to her about lifetimes of hers. You know, Jesus, why am I struggling with writing this course? Why, and he explains a few reasons. One of them, well, this is paraphrasing the story, but he's like, well, in one of your lifetimes you were a bit evil. And in another one, very beautiful and helpful to human beings. But one of them you were a little bit evil, and that carries in your conscience, and you're afraid of harming people again. So you're afraid of writing the course because you don't want to hurt people in case it's a fraud. My advice, get over it. It's not a fraud. Let's go. You're just dwelling on your past, guilt about something you've done in another lifetime. So he would just throw these things out, and yet some of these, they call themselves course experts, say, no, A Course in Miracles does not acknowledge reincarnation as a fact. Kenneth Wapnick mentions, well, how could that be true? If it tells you you can save, if you do certain things, forgiveness techniques, you can save thousands of years off your lifetimes. How is that not reincarnation reference or continuation of life? I don't know how I can save thousands of years if I only live to be 70. That's kind of weird. I mean, that's pretty magical. And what's the point of saving thousands? I'd rather do a little less work and just only try to save 70 years and not do so much work. I don't need to save thousands because I don't live again. You save thousands of years. It means you would have had to come back again and 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 again. How many hundreds of times to add up to 1,000 years to work on these issues that you now rid of yourself of through forgiveness processes. That's pretty cool. That's called efficient. So I know the Course really well, but I don't analyze the Course. I don't know any chapter or verse, not one. I vowed to not even get a copy of the Course that had the chapters and verses when they decided to start stamping them. When they did that, I thought, oh, we're in trouble. Now it's going to be like the Bible. A Course in Miracles, chapter this, verse that says. And, that's when people start cross-referencing, and I'm like, oh, God, we're in trouble. But, it's the way it is. That's how they publish it now. But I don't know not a single chapter verse. I understand the Course. I don't think it. I don't analyze it. I don't have that in me. I just understand it. Why? Because A Course in Miracles is not on its own in this world. It's part of, it says in the book, part of God's plan for salvation. Meaning, God created, its creation is called the children of God. Us. God's children forgot who they are and have strayed off and so on. We'll get into this later. They've strayed off into la-la land and have gotten into a place of fear, and then they project their stuff on each other, which is why they need to heal their relationships, because the relationships are where we project our stuff. So there's this divine plan for salvation, meaning here's a book of one book of others. There are others out there that help humanity, but here's a book that's going to help you heal your relationships so you can come home. That's essentially what it's about. Who are the people that strayed? Who are the people coming home? The children of God. They also are known by another name, Christ. The Christ is all of us. It's not one of us. It's all of us, collectively. Individually, you could say we're the Christ, but it's really a contradiction of terms because Christ is one, not one of. It is oneness in its true sense. So the Christ forgot and split into many. The Christ will remember and come home. In its coming home process, it will have insights and visions. Those are called revelations. So this thing called A Course in Miracles is really part of a plan called the Awakening of Christ Consciousness, or the Awakening of the Christ. That's it. There are other teachers and teachings. I would say don't waste a lot of time on teachers and teachings that aren't giving you really power doses of Christ consciousness. I mean, I'm sure that you can read a bubblegum wrapper and have some little wisdom come out of a word, but why work that hard? Study the best, learn from the best, meditate the best, meaning use the best technique for you to awaken. Devote yourself. Don't do every exercise on the planet. Do the ones that work for your body, but also spiritually. Don't study just everything or what's a fad. Study what actually works. And one way to know if it works, does it erase more of the ego and build more of God? That's what you should be asking yourself. No, this doesn't do either of those, but it's interesting. Okay, well then, when you have spare time, read the interesting, that's fine. But your true spiritual work should be doing one of two things or both. There's less ego by doing this, there's more of God by doing this, or there's less ego and more of God by doing this. That's what I would do. It's efficient, it's focused, it's mastery. So, A Course in Miracles is part of the plan of the awakening of Christ consciousness, which is us, the awakening of us to who we really are. So to me, it's significant in that sense. But it's part of a whole plan. So I can easily talk Course and then switch and talk about a Taoist quote, and then switch and talk about a biblical something or other, and go over here to a Buddhist whatever, and a psychological piece over here, an Edgar Cayce piece over there. Not because I'm being tangential, but only because they're all woven together, make a point about bringing us home. So it all has to keep adding up to that. So I'm not just teaching like a lecture here or an ongoing course that we're coming out to on a book. So, you could think that, and you could say, well, I really want it to be a study and understand the Course. It'll work for that. But understand, I'm not stopping at that point. This is deeper than that. This is studying that which keeps us separate so that we can release it, and studying the awakening process. All that said, I was writing a book. I think this is probably 2+ years ago. And I was writing a book on something. I don't remember which book it was or whatever, but I was writing a book. And I was kind of towards the end, so I was going to have to, start wrapping up whatever it was I was writing. And I went to bed, and it was kind of late, went to bed, but sometime in the middle of the night, I think it was actually 2:22, if I remember correctly. The book tells you in the preface probably, but it was like that. It was like 2:22, and I woke up, and I thought, okay, well, that's neat. The old, numbers, it happens all the time, 11:11, 2:22. That's nice, and now I'll be just going back to sleep. So I, closed my eyes and realized, as I was kind of in the half in and out, I was shown this disc, probably just a little bit bigger than this book, but a disc. The disc, the closest thing I could tell you to what the disc looks like is, you remember the game that you follow the colored lights and you try to memorize what order those. Simon, thank you. So Simon. So you're following and you're pushing and you're trying to remember. It shows you 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4 colored beeps, and you try to memorize them and replicate them. And if you keep replicating them, you keep getting yet another added, beep or whatever. So it's the colors, it's the sounds, it's all this, and you're following this. It kind of looked like a smaller version of that. The other thing I could say it looked like, which is an abstract reference, is on the cover of the Electric Light Orchestra's albums. There's one album, I think it's Discovery was the album, and it has this disc. And there's actually, they actually made a mini video, even though that was before video days. They made a video short for that album that involved that was in a treasure chest, that disc. It was in a treasure chest, and then this Arabian, young guy comes up, opens the chest, and then it's Discovery, and there's the music of ELO as you're watching the video, and then the bad guys come and start chasing him through the desert, and whatever, and he's running for his life because he found this sacred object. It looks a lot more like that because that's a smaller version, and it had the gem tones instead of kind of the flat colors. This may be irrelevant to you, but I love color. So, so that's what the disc looked like, if you want to know. Now, so I'm in half asleep, and I have this vision of this disc. I receive it, and I'm going, okay, well, that's really beautiful. But here's the really trippy thing. As I'm looking at it, it's downloading something to me, like information, let's say. Now that's really interesting. That's you could call it, on History Channel they would say I was abducted by aliens and this was an alien technology download, that's what they would say. So whatever your belief system, it is true that a picture is worth 1,000 words. One symbol holds meaning. Mandalas, which are complex geometric forms, symbols, they hold. There's one over on the wall over there, that disc. But mandalas hold all kinds of information in a geometry. It's not just lines. Oh, that's interesting. It's a square and a triangle. It's information that is held in the multi-layers of the mandala. It's hard to explain that, but that's how it works. And your mind and brain are receiving a download of what's in the mandala when you meditate on a mandala. All right? So I'm holding this disc and it's downloading and I'm going, okay, there's a few things I got from it, like some factoid. And I'm like, wow, that is a brilliant statement. So I'm like, I'm going to remember it. When I wake up, I'm going to need to remember that because maybe I'll do a talk on that. Because that one sentence, how my mind works is, search, find, one sentence, one word, and I get a whole talk from it. It downloads. So this symbol's downloading a few words, and every word can download a whole talk, right? No. Okay, so that's how it works. So I'm getting some key sentences. I'm going, oh, those are cool, so I'm going to be prepared. I'll do a talk on that. I close my eyes, and it's not stopping. And I'm going, but this is some really cool stuff. I'll be sure to remember that. But we often don't. So I thought, I'm starting to notice you're still talking. And I'm not going to remember all this because I don't have a great memory. And people think I memorize things and talk out of memory, and I don't. Things have to come spontaneously or pretty much not at all. I don't have a great memory. So I'm going, I do get lucky and I can remember that you and I had a conversation about such and such, but factoids and quotes, when I do talks, if I'm going to use a quote, I have to print the quote and bring it here and set it there to remind myself who wrote it or who said it, because memorizing who wrote a quote isn't my thing. These things come to me when I'm talking. So I have this information coming. I think I'm going to go to bed and remember it in the morning, and I realize it's too much. There's too much of it. So long story short, I went into my office, and I thought, all right, fine, I'm going to go write these down. Which is a good thing to do to anchor things when you have insights come. So I go to write it down. I'm like, oh, you know what? I might as well just turn this, the computer on and type them. I don't type. I do this. But I'll just, one finger peck kind of some of these notes. And then I'm typing and I'm like, oh, man. Oh, and that. And then it just kept going. And it just kept going. And it's wee hours of the morning. But by daybreak, I had the main concepts of the course done. They just all downloaded. I'm glad I didn't go back to sleep. Heaven would not have held it against me because it doesn't do that. But I'm glad that I fulfilled my part like Helen did hers, writing A Course in Miracles. But what came to me was, and how it came, because as a human being, you always try to filter things. Whether you like it or not, you're going to filter things. So I'm like, okay, I'm getting these concepts. This will be cool. So let's do like 3 concepts. Okay, 5 concepts. Oh, let's just do 7 because 7's a cool number. 7 concepts. You're not kidding me. You're going to want me to do 10, aren't you? You see what I'm saying? As I'm typing, it kept becoming more. Helen did the same thing. How will I know when we're done? Don't ask. Jesus knew. Don't tell her how many pages this is going to be because this isn't going to go well. Make her think it's going to end any day now. And that's kind of what he did. So he just went on, and it took years of the dictation. So it went from, it'll be a few, to 5 to 7, it skipped on up to 12. And of course, it's going to be 12. And, the concepts are not the only concepts in the course, but I think we've captured the main ones. All right? So that's kind of how this came to me, this book, this material. It is very cool, very metaphysical. It's something all of us have happened. We just don't all know it and practice it. It's not the only time I experience a download. It happens every day. It's one of the only times it happened in that form, a symbol that started just downloading. Usually it just it just downloads, and this time it took a form of a symbol. But there's a reason. Because a picture is worth 1,000 words, which means a concept can hold many truths. One concept. So if you can just learn the basic concepts of the Course, you're going to get thousands of pages in just 12 concepts. You can summarize. So, in the intro, A Course in Miracles is actually a course in Christ consciousness, as I said, or a course in awakening the inner Christ. It's part of a divine plan. It goes on to say later, this material might very well seem deep to the reader, and yet it could also seem quite simple and clear. The reason is because it's both. I'm going to skip through the pages. You probably won't want to try to keep up. Page 4, I'm going to read one sentence. The order of the 12 concepts should be seen as generally accurate, but not set in stone. Not only the concepts, but the order of them. When I was writing it, I would love to tell you, it came to me as law, in perfect order, 12 concepts. But since it was coming to me, and I don't type, it was hard to keep up with it. So all of a sudden, my mind would go into another concept and make notes about that, because that's a great one. Let me go back and finish the one I was on. Then another one was... So you're like this, multi-dimensionality to the max. And I'm trying to keep up with all that. So it's very easy to say that some of the concepts could easily be shifted in order to another one. It's not, I mean, this is the right or best order, but if you said, you know, I feel like this one should flip with that one, go with that and see what it brings you. Because this is not like God told me don't you dare. In fact, I noticed too, when I wrote it, I went, there's the order, and I went, wait. No, this one has to come before. I had to play with it a little bit. So that's part of the process. Now, the deeper history is important if you're going to be a course student or a student of spirituality. Even just not a course student, a student of spirituality should know the stuff we're about to cover. Because it ties together teachings of Christ consciousness, Jesus, Buddhism, Edgar Cayce, and all these other things that are the light of God coming to us to help us through. So the deeper history, although the message of A Course in Miracles is actually rooted or originates in the Holy Spirit of God, the story of its writing began over 2,000 years ago when Helen, who we know in our time, Helen Schuckman, who received the Course, she knew Jesus in another lifetime as an Essene. The Essenes were an aesthetic sect of people living in Palestine or the Jordan region, off living on their own. They were the Gnostics or New Agers of the time. Thought to be a little airy-fairy, thought to be fanatical. They pray, they meditate. They're just out there. These people, they pray all day, they wear only white. They live in a desert where nothing can live. The Dead Sea, there's a reason it's called the Dead Sea. Nothing lives in it. The sodium or salt content in the water, the Dead Sea, which I think is the lowest landmass on Earth. I think that's another little factoid about the Dead Sea. But nothing can live in the water. Now, if you were like, hey, guys, well, let's go build a place. Let's build a retreat. It's like Findhorn. You know where we ought to go? To the desolate coast of freezing Scotland. But they pulled it off because they were getting guidance from something else that protected them. The Essenes, the same thing. Hey, let's go to the Dead Sea. That's like saying, let's go to the forest of the skull and crossbones. It doesn't sound real inviting. And yet they're like, oh, let's go. And they go, and they made an oasis there. Because they made communing with God a regular practice. They believed it's possible to hear Spirit guiding you on how to literally create systems, engineer systems for maintaining water tables in a place where there's no water. So these people would go and collect water off leaves every morning, which sounds tedious, but when you're one with those plants, it's a loving experience. Hard for humans to get it. Edgar Cayce said the lifestyle of the Essenes would almost be considered abuse of today. And he said that 100 years ago. Today it would be like, whoa, way out there. Because we still had some rough systems going on 70 years ago or whatever, and he's saying that. The Essenes, it was tough, man. But these people, everything was so connected. We do morning prayers to the angels, certain angels. We do evening prayers to certain angels. Midday we do such and such. We wear white, we honor. And everybody comes and that joins, they have nothing financial, that's fine. They have billions. It all goes in one pot. It becomes part of this system. You don't like that? You're worried about you? Then don't join us. Trust all kinds of things that these folks would have expected. And Helen was in a scene. She remembered to be in a scene, and she knew that she had had experience with Jesus, and he verified that. So she knew him before, and when Jesus began speaking to Helen, going from page 5 to 6, she resisted the material, even though she somehow knew that the voice that she was hearing was Jesus, and that the material was valid and important. So she asked Jesus why she tried so hard to resist receiving the material. Jesus explained to her that in her previous lifetime as an Essene, he had foretold to her that he would one day return to her and call upon her to join with him in an important project for humanity. He also explained that this contract was not meant to be done at this time. She wasn't supposed to be receiving this material until her next lifetime. So she's saying, why am I resistant to this material if it's so meant to be? And he has another answer. Well, that's because we have a contract, which is why you feel she knew something was real here. So that feeling you have? Yeah, that's because you remember the contract. And so it's really great. But why am I resisting? Well, technically, now that you ask, we weren't supposed to do this until your next lifetime. By then, you would have been ready. So she could have said, well, I have an idea. Come back later. I'd like a little more peace around this. And instead, he says, you weren't ready. But then why are we doing it now? And his words, because the world is worsening at an alarming rate. He was saying, things are going to hell in a handbasket, and we need to bring in interventions prematurely. There's something called divine timing, remember? But when you try to speed things up beyond divine timing, it's allowed to be done. But you will have an extra list of things to have to handle. So divine timing, although it takes patience, is typically smoother than trying to prepare yourself for a consciousness you weren't going to have for another couple hundred years. So he says to her, so, given this new information that I just shared with you, Helen, if you feel it's too much for you, say no, and I will understand. And then he says, but I know you'll make the right decision. But I know you'll make the right choice. He has to throw that in there like, oh, So she did it. It came to her a bit early, but she did it. She pushed through her resistance. She may not have ever completed the book if it had not, however, been for a few supportive friends and colleagues, including a guy named Edgar Casey, who wasn't a friend and colleague, but his son was alive and well. And when Helen was like, this stuff is like wacko. What's this channeling and Jesus? First of all, I'm Jewish, and I don't even believe in God. So this God thing and Jesus of all people, you should have brought me Moses if you had any compassion. I'm Jewish. That would have made more sense to me. You bring me Jesus, and you bring me a spiritual figure, and I'm a therapist. Hearing voices isn't like good. So none of this makes any sense. None of it's really good. But a friend of hers, Bill, he said, Helen, there's this guy named Edgar Casey who had something like you. He was receiving stuff. He struggled with it. He was afraid of it. He did it, and it saved and worked, brought a lot of good to the people in the world. She's like, well, that's airy-fairy stuff, this Casey or whomever you're talking about. But sure, I'll look at one of the books about him. She reads the book and realizes there's a guy who didn't do this for the money. There's a guy who did this to be helpful. She was moved, not by what he said or did even. She was actually more moved by his humility. And that's really important for you and I to remember. We can change people through simplicity and humility as much or more as our words. Yeah. So it's very beautiful, and she was moved in that sense, so she decided to go and meet Edgar Casey's son. And it was mostly Bill coaxing her, but she did, and she goes to meet Casey's son, and Bill says, show him the book. I don't want to show him the book. Come on. So show him the book. And he's saying, worst case scenario, the guy will say, this is fraudulent, it's bogus, and you can burn it. They made an agreement that if anything comes up that proves that it's bogus, they'll burn it. And she was like relieved, thinking, then the only big problem is that I'll be crazy because I'm hearing voices and I'll need therapy or medicine or something. So they had this odd communication agreement, her and her friend Bill, and they went to Casey's son. He read it and he said, this is real. This is real. And he said, and the stuff in this book from the bit I'm reading is at least as deep as any of the work my father ever did. So it's like that to the next level. And she realized, if I admire this Casey guy and this guy saying, this is real, it really meant something to her. So there you have it, stamp of approval from the Casey people. Helen asked Jesus a few times about Casey and his work, and Casey, Jesus validated, said words along the lines of, Casey worked directly for me. He didn't say, yeah, kind of a cool guy. He said, no. He was amazing. He did things that most people couldn't do, wouldn't do, and so on. And he worked directly for me. Bam! Like, imagine putting that on your business card. He is one of mine, Jesus. Like, that's pretty cool. It's like Shiva saying, I'll give him 6 thumbs up. Anyway, that's a pretty cool stamp of approval. At the same time, he did tell Helen in their personal conversations, one of the primary mistakes Casey made, which I've shared in talks before, was he asked, how can I be helpful? Jesus came through and guided him and taught him how to do the readings and whatever. But he said Casey never asked when to stop. He never took breaks, and he worked himself literally to death. He died of exhaustion. See, Jesus is saying, I never asked for him to exhaust himself. And this is for all of us to hear. I never asked you to be such a good mother that you destroyed your brain cells. I never asked you to go past your limit of your own healthiness. Be a good tour guide. Be a good musician. Be good at what you do. Ask for my help and let me channel through you. But ask also when it's okay to take a break. And Helen learned in her process of typing, transcribing and all, she had to learn how to do that. She'd be typing away and so forth, and he would be telling her certain things to write, and she would change the words because of her own filters. But he wouldn't say anything. So Jesus, channel. And eventually, her conscience, she knew she did it on an unconscious level. She said, by the way, are there any corrections you would like me to make? And he said, I'm glad you asked. But I'm waiting for you to learn to ask. Yeah, pretty much everything. No. But yeah, I said this and you said that. And some of the examples are absolutely bizarre, absurd. She would hear and just change the wording completely of whatever he said because her brain was having a hard time accepting. But it wasn't just ego. Remember, she was getting information that she wasn't ready for, and so God bless her. So, again, the Course goes on to explain overanalyzing things is unhealthy. It's another way of crucifying the Spirit of Christ within things. That's a quote it's not a Course quote, that's my own line. Overanalysis is just another way of crucifying the Spirit of Christ within things. But when a friend, Alan Cohen, read the book, that's the line he loved most in the whole book. He's a real heart kind of guy. Overanalyzing kills the Spirit of Christ in all things. He dug that. Simplicity, but the way the Course literally says it itself, simplicity is very difficult for twisted minds. Nothing is so alien to such people as is the simple truth. So the people that overanalyze, which could be you and me at times, if we take this material and overanalyze it, you lose it. You've lost touch with it because you're not feeling it. You're not letting it download like the disc. The disc is also a sentence that can download information. The disc is this book that you could sit with this book and let it download. We have a symbol on the cover. That's not the symbol that I saw. But it was easier to put the flower of life than it was to poach the ELO logo. So, yeah, right, royalties, So this book could do that for you. It could download. If you believe that and sat, it could be a sentence in it, a quote in it, whatever. Things can download. We can be multidimensional, but people don't realize that. So this came to me that there are 12 primary concepts of the Course. Now, in a form that might be posted online, may not, but definitely it'll be in the Course next week. We'll post it for the people that register. The 12 concepts of A Course in Miracles are as follows, but they are the spiritual version and the ego version in contrast. Make sense? So there's two columns. There's bliss and oneness versus separation. So that's what the chart looks like. It's a chart of dual terms. Not because A Course in Miracles is dualistic, but that's the way we made it. So to God, there's bliss and oneness. Us, separation. The opposite of bliss and oneness. Then, instead of bliss and oneness, we have forgiveness. Opposite, judgment. We could have love, opposite, fear. We could have innocence, opposite, guilt and shame. God's Holy Spirit, the ego. If people are watching this online, by the way, they can wait till it's over and go back and listen to this again and write these down. You don't have to try to keep up. Responsibility versus projection. Right-mindedness versus wrong-mindedness. Reality versus illusion. Spiritual world versus material world. Content versus form. The unlimited soul versus the limited body. Holy relationships versus special, codependent relationships. Those are the 12 concepts. 12 pairs of concepts. Now, they're not only cool, like, wow, yeah, bliss and oneness. Now I can go in this book, I can get a summary of, it's not just Course in Miracles. Remember, if you're a student of spirituality, this is important for you to understand how reality is different from illusion. It's important. If you're ready to deepen your walk, if all you want to do is I'm at a level of spirituality where I'm just wanting to enjoy the flowers outside. That's all. I don't want any deep stuff. I'm just going to, look, a rainbow. That's kind of cool if that's where you're at. But when you're ready to say, what is real about that rainbow and what is an illusion, how does that rainbow reflect reality and illusion? When you want to understand, it's not just, relationships are not just, if you want to have healthy relationships, you have to simply learn the good old-fashioned give and take. You got to learn to sacrifice if you want to have a good relationship. That's not true, and it's not good for people to believe in such things. Nothing can help relationships but to heal them. If you don't heal them, nothing's going to work. You're just going to have a little better something for a day, but it's not going to bring you the bliss of the actual relationship. So this is how to get there, how to get the deepest parts of everything. So it can be a little much for some people, but you think this is a little much, then go read the Course, because this is a simple version in a way. But it's deepening the Course, not bettering, deepening the Course, but in a way it's also simplifying. So not only do you have these terms that are opposed, reality, illusion, and so on, there's also a progression and a digression. Meaning, the digression, how did we get here? How did we get here? You can read Buddhism. There's thousands of pages of Buddhist texts and tantras. They call them sutras and tantras. You can go and study pages and pages and pages. There's a lot there. Course in Miracles, pages and pages. The Bible, pages and pages. Just simplify it. How did we get here? It starts very similar to some of Buddha's summaries, okay? But we separate from God. We judge ourselves for the separation. It doesn't really happen, but we think it does. So we believe we separate from God. We judge. All I'm doing is going down the list of the negatives, and it tells you how we got here. We judged ourselves for it. We became afraid once we judged ourselves. Once we became afraid, we started feeling guilty and shameful. Then, to deal with the guilt and shame, we created what's called the ego. You cover my tracks. The ego then says, I'll cover your tracks. You know how? I'm going to teach you how to project it on everybody else. Now you're safe. It's never your fault. The only reason you left heaven is because God's rude. He kicked you out. Because the heaven metaphor is the Garden of Eden. There you were. minding your own business, and a snake started tempting you. It wasn't your fault. Snakes are always attractive, right? So it teaches us to project. When you do, you started developing something called the wrong mind. When you had the wrong mind, you started developing illusions. Once you started having illusions, the grand of them all is the universe and the material world. I'm just going down the list. Once you created the material world, you started having literal experience with it, thinking it's the truth. This is what's real, called form. So the illusion became the material world. It started getting interpreted as form. Now, there's this world. How am I going to live here? I need a body. Here comes the body. And once we have the body, now that I have a body, I'm going to need a relationship. Right. That's how we got here. Do you have a solution? Yes. Let's look at this. Bliss and oneness was the start when we separated. We had bliss and oneness, but we separated. We could have, number 2 on the positive list, forgiven ourselves, and we wouldn't have continued the problem. But we didn't. Instead, we judged, back to the negative side. Okay, so we could have now then, can you just come back and start practicing love? No, we're going to practice fear. Innocence versus guilt and shame. Just start believing in innocence. Start asking to see the innocence in yourself and others, and you'll counter the negative row. No, I don't want that. I want to go into guilt and shame. I could start using God's Holy Spirit as my guide instead of my ego. It's a solution. Oh, what about the next line down that's negative? Projection of my stuff on other people. There's a solution. Responsibility. Be responsible. I thought about that. But that tends to make me have to show up. It's always so much easier when I go, I would have been a much better person if it weren't for them. And it just keeps getting worse. And then I could choose right-mindedness. Oh, that takes some discipline. Reality versus illusion. Well, how am I going to get into reality? All I do is swim in illusion. Everything's an illusion here. How do I learn reality? It's too complicated to my brain that's stuck in illusion. And in fact, addicted to illusion. Spiritual world. Well, just start with that one. Forget all the others for a moment. Let's start identifying with the spiritual world instead of the material world. Oh, that's easy. So I'm going to go ahead and start identifying with the spiritual world. Let's see. I'm going to go to the bank and tell them that in my spiritual world, I have a balance that's higher than in their material figures. In my spiritual world, I don't need fuel in my car. I can just keep driving it. None of it's practical. Boom, back to the material world. And it just keeps digressing and so on. Solutions are in the left column. And the projections and the ego version of everything is in the right-hand side of this. Separation, judgment, fear, and so on. Anytime we could shift to the left side to counter something that's off to the right side. Okay? But another way to summarize this chart. It starts with bliss and oneness became separation. Now I go down to level 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then when I get to 12, what's 12 again? Holy relationships versus codependent or unhealthy special relationships. Holy ones. Wait, we started with oneness that became separation. Watch this. Oneness that became separation. All the way down the chart, it became holy relationships, like oneness, versus unhealthy relationships, codependence and special, they call it special in the course, unhealthy ones, which is in alignment with separation. Meaning, technically, the only ones that matter, it's not ultimately true, to say we're going to ignore all the others, but figuratively, you could start with oneness that became separation, and if you would heal your unhealthy relationships and have holy ones, it would bring you home again. So this is important because it looks like, oh God, we fell further and further and further, all the way to the bottom, and we got to work our way all the way up again. Actually, when God sees us falling all the way, it throws down there to be there by the time we land. I know what'll work. We're like, separation, guilt, shame. Oh my God, what's happening? Oh, universe. Ego, and the universe gets created. Material world, I have a body now. I'm in a limited consciousness. Here come relationships, and God already put the answer. The solution to everything, believe it or not, is in making holy your relationships. Not your romances, all your relationships. Why are relationships so relevant? Because it's where we most took all the stuff that happened in the other steps and blamed it on someone else. Projected it on other people. Solution? Stop and not just heal your relationships, but if you want to go home, are you willing to see in the face of the other people in your life the holiness that you once separated from, way back at step one? Oh, you don't understand. That's God up here, step one. This is people. People are annoying. God is wonderful. And God's going, oh, no, no, no. You don't like me as much as you think you do. You blamed me for your falling from grace. You blamed me for not feeling bliss and joy all the time. You're blaming me, and then you're blaming yourself. So you not only don't like me, you don't even like yourself, even though you think you do. By the time you got to earth, you took all of your stuff and you squeezed it out and poured it out on everybody else. People you like and people you don't like are all mirroring your internal process of how well you're doing in your healing with God. So it's weird. Like, isn't spirituality supposed to have something to do with body of Christ? Amen. A host, isn't it supposed to be like meditating with mala beads and looking at, mandalas on the wall? Isn't it sitting in lotus position? Jesus is going, I don't know. You've been doing that for quite a while and it didn't work, did it? So can we just skip right to it? Relationships. And then our brain goes, okay, so you're saying if I find a hot other and call it a twin flame, got to get flame in there because it's hot. This is my twin flame. That's what Jesus meant. He's like, oh my God. You people are further off than I thought. You think that that's what I'm talking about? That's making someone special again. I'm asking you to not see fabulous, chic, cute, hot in your relations, or even just in people. People I like, people I don't like. He said, I'm not wanting you to do any of that. I'm wanting you to learn to see that whenever you think you see anything in anyone, it's coming from you. Which takes us back several steps, halfway up the chart, back to responsibility, which then would counter projection. So when I work on my relationships, I'm healing all of my other stuff. It's brilliant. And he comes out with this book and says, I don't need you to wear white anymore, meaning in your robes and live in the Jordan region. I don't need you to live in a pyramid. I don't need you to wear a certain thing or have a certain religious ritual and so on and so on. I want you just to find peace by healing your projections. You mean so we can get along? No. Because if you find peace by healing your projections with others, you're actually, without realizing it, going full circle and healing your relationship with God, and you get to go home. If all you do is improve your romance on earth, you actually haven't done anything. Oh, you're going to die, and you're going to say, well, that was neat. I dated this time. Okay. And how is that going to help you in your next lifetime? I'd like to date again. Okay, well, why don't we just get cut to the chase? Why don't we give you 1,000 lifetimes of dating? Okay? Let's just check back with us in 1,000 lifetimes. Because by then, maybe you'll say, I'm wondering if there's anything else. So it's amazing to imagine that we are the Christ collectively. We believe we left heaven. We came into the earth plane, did all these bizarre things, which we'll get to, one concept after another, we'll get to it, how it all happened. We're here, and then we look like many. One part of us woke up, named Jesus. And he woke up that he's the Christ. That's what it means, Jesus the Christ. Jesus remembered our true self. Oh, thank God, thank beloved Jesus. And he's going, no. Yes, I deserve respect because I did it. But you're going to do it too. It's inevitable. It's your destiny. But here's a really cool little gift I'm going to give you all. If we're one and I woke up, technically there's a part in every one of you that already woke up. The Jesus in you. But I'm a female and I want the female name for, here we go again. We have issues with Jesus and Christianity, and I get that. He understands that too. Yeah, it's pretty twisted. So whatever way you need it to be that you can come back to the truth without getting triggered by names and whatever else, try it. Do something. Call it the elder brother. There's people that refer to that. Some people have to call him Yeshua instead of Jesus, if that's what you need to be able to find peace, fine. If you want to call it, your highest self, call it that. At some point, you're still going to have to ask yourself why you don't want to use that name and work on healing that too. All right. Now, after the concepts, the 12 primary concepts, as noted on page 15, the digression and descent, also known as the fall from heaven, re-experienced daily can be summarized as follows. We chose to separate from God, which led to judgment, the feelings of fear, shame, and guilt. We then invented an ego-based program in our mind in order to hide or cover our tracks. The ego encouraged us to avoid taking responsibility by using either denial or projection. The projection of our judgment, fear, and guilt resulted in a material universe, the world in which we live, and the individual separate bodies with which we identify. We will witness the digression of our thoughts and beliefs through our relationships with other human beings we now see before us. That's a summary of the fall, the digression. All right. And so the 12 things, I've already named what they are, the 12 main concepts of the course. And then when I get over to page 21, I call it First Things First. And after this, we are going to go into creating miracles, and I think that's it maybe for today. First, more important than any particular words of the course are primary concepts. More important than words are concepts. Make sure we get that. And they're symbolized by words, but the concepts are more important. A feeling is more important than the details. One term or word, because studying A Course in Miracles or this material or other materials, terminology gets in the way for us sometimes. One term or word is the use of the masculine he in A Course in Miracles. Now, I remedied that in here, which I liked that I did that. But yeah, it's true. A Course in Miracles will use the word he for God. It'll use he for Holy Spirit. And it's a weird kind of a way you can say, well, is that because the Holy Spirit's a he? It doesn't have a gender. So why are we using he? It's kind of weird, but the little bit of conversation that was done on that with Jesus was almost like he's saying, I'm going to use your old religious terminology so that I can piss you off a little bit, trigger you a little bit, and have you work on that. I mean, that's kind of what he says. It's kind of weird. So it's not like he's apologizing for it. He's going, yeah, well, that's there. Kenneth Wapnick once said, somebody says in a talk, well, Ken, what I did is I went through the book and I changed it to a she. And he said, well, that's fine if that makes you feel better. And you think, okay, cool. And then he adds, but you might want to look at why it was triggering you to see the word he. I know some people wouldn't get that at all, but it's important because if it's a trigger, it's a trigger. Not because she is better or he's better, but if you're triggered either way. If somebody changed it to she and you found yourself having, an aneurysm over it, you should look at that. So one of the issues is terminology in the course, and the word he is one of the issues. Another potentially confusing term is the word son or sonship to describe God's children. It'll say, you're going to run into a person today. Here's something you might want to do if you have a conflict with that son of God. Are you saying we only have conflicts with males? Why are you calling him son? And besides, that almost could make women feel like you're not enlightened until you become a male, then called a son. In the meantime, even the Old Testament might call you a daughter of man. Oh, you're not one of them, are you? A female, a daughter of man? I am a son of God. It's not the intention. It's actually very deep and beautiful if you understand it, but the terminology and history gets in our head and gets in the way. He's calling you, male or female, a son of God because, and I use children of God because I'm trying to be nice to the readers. That's kind of what it is. I know Jesus is saying, Michael, I called it a son of God. Yeah, I know, Jesus. You don't get it. These people they'll get upset. I'm going to call it children. But I explained it in the book so that I could use it properly. And it's this. Plural, we are the children of God. But when we go home, we're not plural anymore. We're one. So he's using the word son of God because he's respecting that you are one with God. You are the one son of God. So that's why they said about Jesus, Jesus was God's only begotten son. True. Along with all of us. Because God's son is one. God had one creation that thinks it fell and splintered into an endless number of beings. So, it's right to call it the sonship or the son. But we don't have to make it wrong to also call it the children of God because it rests a little easier on our brains. Another term is the word mind. It's important, again, for spiritual students, not just course students. Spiritual students, you will hear the use of the word mind. Ernest Holmes, science of mind. What does he mean? Science of intellect, brain. That's not what he means. Divine mind means what? Divine intellect? No. Mind is a word because when most of these books were written, we were in what we would call not ancient religion, but we were in old school spirituality. The term mind meant like the consciousness. So science of mind meant the truth, not science. It meant the truth of God. Not the science of mind. It's like somebody better change the title because people started getting into science of mind and it was attracting mostly intellectuals. Spiritual intellectuals, but intellectuals. Why? Because I like that. It has the word science and mind. I'm in. And it's not what it was meant to do. Ernest Holmes. Science of mind meant the truth of God. That sounds religious, so you wouldn't get the audience that you get with mind. Mind meaning, I'm teaching science of mind. I'm teaching you how to use your mind to manifest a new car. I like this religion. But it isn't. It was meant to be the truth of God so that you come to peace, and in your peaceful state, you'll be able to attract good things anyway. So that's that. So when you hear mind, I would recommend it mean higher mind, meaning your soul, your heart and soul. In the book, I'll call it the soul mind, versus sometimes I'll put the brain mind or the intellect mind to make a distinction between the thinker and the soul. All right? The word mind is actually meant to imply higher mind or soul. There are themes in A Course in Miracles. Themes, not just concepts. There are some important themes that we should cover. In addition to the few key words that are often misinterpreted, there are also themes that are misinterpreted by many readers, and it causes students of the Course some grief and confusion. The main issue stems from certain teachings of the Course being taken too literally or too seriously. For example, although Jesus clearly teaches that everything in the material universe, including our bodies and illnesses, are an illusion, he still encourages us to respect the illusion by taking care of our day-to-day needs. Do you see where that could become a problem? So here's the theme. Don't take it serious when he's saying this is all an illusion. Understand, take care of yourself. That's not one of the 12 major concepts. It's in there, but it's a theme. It's actually the way Jesus eases our minds by saying, you know what, in reality, this is the way it is. But you're not awake to reality yet, so let's deal with things at the level you can understand. You have a headache. No, you don't. You don't have a head, you don't have an ache, you don't have a body, and you're not even here. But you think you have a headache, so take a stinking aspirin. That's kind of how he's doing it. This is where you're at, let's deal with it. Another commonly misunderstood theme in the Course is found in the insistence on our humility. Course in Miracles encourages us to affirm that we know nothing. Now, in the positive thinking era that we're in, science of mind, I can create it. I am God. The power within me. All these great popular phrases, they're very different. And Course in Miracles is saying, let's start with, I don't know anything. Very different. Strip it down, humble. Not because you're going to be left there, But a lot of people don't dig the Course. They're like, I don't want to put that on my mirror. I don't know anything. How's that going to help me? I want the ones that say, I'm brilliant and successful. And he's going, yeah, that's your ego that wants to believe it's brilliant. How can you be brilliant without knowing who you really are? It's fabricated. You can only be brilliant and successful and shining and pure if you're in touch with your true self. And you won't be in touch with your true self unless you get rid of what you think you are and let me show you. Humble. It's humility. That's where that comes from. An important theme in A Course in Miracles. The Course encourages us that we know nothing. The negative interpretation of not knowing something results from our ego-inflated ego perceiving such statements as a threat to our, ego-based narcissism. As taught in the 12-step recovery programs, we have to completely tear down our misperceptions of ourselves and our past in order to build a new self. Another important piece of A Course in Miracles is prayer. Many students of the Course often wonder to whom we should pray. Is it Jesus? You can read the Course and you're going to go. Okay, but he said, talk to me. So that's Jesus. I'm going to pray to Jesus. No, wait. Then another part's going to say, speak to the Holy Spirit. Pray to God. Ask your Father, God. There's the gender thing again. Ask your Father to help you with a situation. Talk to the Holy Spirit. Talk to me, Jesus. Which one am I supposed to pray to? Answer is, doesn't matter. They all get CC'd on everything. You like that? All right. But it's not as effective to pray to lesser beings such as deceased relatives. You can say, well, if everything's one, I'll just pray to my deceased uncle. Not the same, because in your mind, the uncle doesn't yet symbolize the absolute highest of high. So why don't you just pray to the highest of high? Next, students of spirituality in A Course in Miracles also ask, what are we allowed to or supposed to be praying for? Am I supposed to be praying for a holy instant, the atonement, right-mindedness, forgiveness, a miracle? Because these are all terms in the Course. I forgot which one to pray for. Again, they're all same. They're just different angles of the same thing. Because miracles are the same as the atonement in the sense that I'm praying for the atonement, but all the atonement is all my miracles added together. Should I be praying for a holy instant? All a holy instant is the time on the clock when you had a miracle. All of them are the same thing. The old story of there's an animal of whatever kind in the center of a room. Everybody walks up with a blindfold, touches different, and they all describe it differently. This thing is leathery. This thing is soft. This thing is tall. This thing is hardened. It's whatever it is. It's all different perspectives. Or the old saying of a group of people witnessing an accident. They all had different perceptions. It's like that. It's all the shift from where I was in fear, ego, etc., into God. That shift is called a miracle, added up called the atonement. It's happening in a period of time called the holy instant, etc., etc. Okay? And is it okay to pray for stuff? Quote unquote, stuff. Yes, it is. We're encouraged to seek first the consciousness of God, and all else will be given automatically. So you can ask for stuff. This gets kind of tricky. I'd like to throw another deep one at you here. And that is, the Course will say, God will not grant you answers to prayers if they're going to cause you fear. So, because we asked Jesus in the Course and elsewhere, how come prayers sometimes don't come to pass? Fulfillment. He says, well, because God, the Holy Spirit, will not bring you an answer, a miracle, or a manifestation if it'll cause you fear. Now, what our head says, the obvious, which is true, but there's a deeper answer, but there's a shallower answer, and it's true, and that's the one we usually go to, which is, for example, if I were praying for something to happen in my life, let's say I want to have $1 million. And then Jesus says, but God's not going to give you something if it'll cause you fear. So what he means is, if I were given that money, all of a sudden, it might blow my mind because I'm not used to having that. That would cause me fear. Therefore, God won't give me the $1 million. That is an accurate answer, but it's a simple one. There's a deeper one. Check this out. God will not grant you your wishes and prayers if they'll cause you fear means this. most everything you pray for is something you want that's kind of linear, and if you get it, you're going to think that's what you actually needed, which would endorse more fear and encourage more fear in you, because it's going to make you believe in this world. Like if you said, what I want is a partner, a life mate, but they're not showing up. God must think that that's going to cause me fear. No, no. The fact that you think that a person's going to give you something is a fearful thought. It's a fearful, fear-based, limited thought. Therefore, it can't give that to you. Why? Not because it could give a relation to somebody else, but if you think something gives you something that doesn't, it's not true. God can't give you the manifestation of something that's not true. It has to become true. Is that making sense? It can't be connected to falsity, such as, if only I had this life mate, wow, I hear that's what's really the best thing on earth, so that's what I would like. And God's going, man, you're so close. Just look past the person to the oneness with anyone. You'll have it, and then the person will show up. But it'll come from your higher mind that you just attained instead of what you thought you wanted. Because all too often, when you get the person, the life mate, you stop looking for what was higher beyond it. And that's what it means. I can't give you things that will make you get stuck in a lower consciousness. And it's not that relationship is lower, money is lower. It's only our belief in that. Okay? It's only I might have that belief and you might not. Or vice versa. It's all our perceptions that need healed. Christ teaches that one of the most powerful prayers is called the miracle prayer. This is prayed to God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, whatever, every morning as follows. Really cool. If you will tell me what to do, only that is what I will do. Also, tell me not to do what you would not have me do, which is what he was telling Helen. Remember to ask me what's not right. Edgar Casey, remember to ask me when you should take a break. Okay? So the Course explains that this prayer is it's the open door here. We will always be ready. We have to always be ready, 3 words, ready, willing, and able. Here are the essentials for listen, learn, and do. Be ready, willing, and able to listen, learn, and do. Be ready to listen, willing to learn, and able to do. He's talking about, you want to be a light worker? This is the key. I love that. If we only took this one page of this book and the material in the Course on this topic and got it, then I got my walking, my marching orders. This is the prayer of the light worker. I'm supposed to say, if you will tell me what to do, only that is what I will do. The key wording. You can't play with the wording and change it to an English that you think is better. He's saying it for a reason. If you tell me what to do, only that I will do means I will use my will to choose it. So it sounds like, Jesus, I know you maybe lived 2,000 years ago. Maybe it's the English translation, but dude, you're kind of missing some good grammar here. I mean, I will to thou will not, and wist and this, it sounds really strange. But he goes, no, I want you to use the words I just gave you because I want you to use I will. Tell me what to do and that I will to do. Not just I will do, but often I will to do. You see? I'm affirming to do. Not I will do it. I will to do it. And then also tell me not to do what you would not have me do. Important, but again, be ready to listen, willing to learn, and able to do. All teachers of God have to surrender to Christ, doing only what they're guided to do and not doing what they're not guided to do. It's a little bit difficult sometimes, and I think it's a little bit of a challenge. It's something new to learn. The concept of I'm going to get guidance on what to do, but I also have to watch for guidance on what not to do. It almost sounds like, God, I have to be pretty hypervigilant. But in fact, over time, it becomes an easier thing because you know what resonates with peace. You don't have to think it, measure it, calculate it. You just go, this kind of doesn't resonate with peace, and so on and so on. And we're still going to slip. There's times when you're going to go, well, gosh, I need a new car, and this one sure resonates with peace. God, it's so cool looking. Well, that cool looking isn't the same as peace, but your head is blending the two, and it's hard to see them apart. I've done that at least once, and did with the cars, and did the choice, once where I just said, since I'm not sure, I'm going to walk away and see how I feel about it tomorrow. And when I walked away, I felt no call for that car. It was clean, because everything else was feeling shiny and compulsive, and it all made sense, but it confused my mind enough to where I said, if I'm not sure, let me pause and then get clear. And I'm glad I did. Another issue is the Course teaches at 2 levels. That one is probably one of the most confusing themes in A Course in Miracles. And it's not just A Course in Miracles. If you're just a student of spirituality, understand this. Spirit always teaches at 2 levels. One that is and one that seems to be. The truth and where you are for now. In truth, you have no body, you can't be sick. But, oh, I'm sorry, you feeling sick, honey? Why don't we get you a massage today? See, the truth and then the other. And it gets a little complicated because you're reading A Course in Miracles. And if you don't know this theme, you're like, oh, I love this Course in Miracles. I'm reading, and the body's an illusion. The material world doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a head, and can't have a headache. There's no such thing as sickness. Next page. Be sure to take a aspirin when you have a headache. Like, it can get a little like, oh, that's contradicting, and I think this is not really that good a material, because you're not understanding that 1 minute he's talking to you from what is, and then he shifts to, oh, but I'm going to honor where you're at. And that's called compassion, and it's called bridging. So, Spirit teaches on 2 levels, and that's another thing, is back to our chart, one of the 2 concepts, it's one concept with 2 parts, is the one called content versus form. That one is not one most people are familiar with. You might have heard of reality and illusion, but not content and form. Because Spirit speaks primarily in content. Meaning, what is the real message here? Form means the words used. Content means what I'm trying to get across. So God's like saying, let's say you have a dream tonight. Come direct from God. And God says, whatever it is. You wake up and go, I had this dream that I'm going to marry somebody. Where God might have said to you, I'm very proud of how you're healing your issues with other people. Your brain says, I'm going to marry somebody. That's form. It's detail. It's literal. God speaks concepts and content, content, not form, but content, and symbolic. Okay? So that's another one of those 2 things. One is God, it's all symbolic and deep. The other is literal. And the prayers we do are often literal, so we don't get those things because God's saying, if I honor your literal too much, you'll get stuck in it, and that's not what I want you to do. I'm here to help you grow. Why would I want to endorse your fall? I'm trying to get your ascension. Okay? The next chapter, my favorite title for my subtitles, Life on Earth is a Psychotic Episode. This world was made to replicate heaven as much as possible so we wouldn't miss heaven too much. Or we wouldn't get too suspicious that something's wrong. However, there's nothing real about what we see with our physical eyes. If what we see is an illusion, then how sane is it to spend time interpreting it and making our decisions based on what we see with our illusion-based eyes? Based on my eyes, you would make a good date. But spiritually speaking, I better think twice because my eyes lie to me. You might not be anything like what my eyes are telling me. So my eyes might go, they're kind of, young and beautiful. I bet if I date them, I'll feel better about myself. None of that's true, but your eyes are being used to lie to you, and that's ego-based. Where Spirit's going to be saying, I wouldn't do this if I were you. Close your eyes and ask who the person is from God's standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint. Now you're shifting to content instead of form. And then, who's actually more sick? Those who collapse because they sense something is wrong with this picture, the ego's world of illusion, or those who believe in what they see and seem to functionally build a life around it? Like if we're talking about psychology, people with neurosis and so on, people that have mental issues. I'm saying they're having a hard time adapting to this world, and we actually think they're mentally ill. But I wonder who's more mentally ill. Those who recognize something's wrong with this picture and can't adapt very well, or those who think everything's just peachy. It's kind of like we're just buying the illusions a bit better, and we call that functional. And then who's calling it functional? I wouldn't trust that person who calls the insanity functional. So who can we trust anymore? So going on to one of the last, the workbook lessons. A Course in Miracles has workbook lessons. The workbook lessons in the Course are not affirmations as found in most New Age books or spiritual books. The Course lessons are designed to reprogram. I mean, they're really designed to actually reprogram our soul, mind, our heart, along with our subconscious patterns of belief. After choosing the Holy Spirit instead of the ego as our guide, the process of reprogramming begins. The Holy Spirit begins to reprogram our soul, mind, and brain, followed by these areas being rewired, which then rewires our nervous system, which then alters what we see with our eyes or how we interpret what we perceive. For this reason, many Course workbook lessons are specifically based on vision or how we see. It's so deep, you would have to almost study quantum physics and maybe even studying how vision works in the body to understand how deep the Course is and what the workbook lessons are. Oh, aren't those the positive statements at the end? No. Every one of them is designed very profoundly, not just neat statements, nice statements, loving statements. They're actually designed to bring spiritual things, beings, entities, angels, whatever, into your mind, pull out some of the synapse, some of the neurons, pulling out some of your experiences, unplugging them, and then rewiring everything to where all of a sudden you go, I thought my life was terrible and I'm starting to remember things about myself that aren't so bad. Where did that come from? You got rewired. You're healing. Healing doesn't just mean like what you do for yourself. You're better off talking about healing that comes from multidimensional consciousness, because it knows where all the secrets are, where all the bodies have been buried. It knows all the skeletons in the closet. It knows where to go to open doors and bring stuff out and release it. Okay, now wait, if you're asking me to trust in spirit to come in and start pulling stuff out that I don't get to control, how much, what comes out, and what, speed, I mean, I don't like that. Then just remember this. It knows better than you do how much you can handle at any given time, first of all. Second of all, the fact that you don't trust it is not exactly a stellar statement, because that means you're saying, I don't trust God. Just saying. Next, another reason to try this is because if I can say, I'm going to remind myself that if I allow Spirit to do this, this Spirit knows all dimensions of me, and I only remember limited pieces. So it knows how to pull out pieces that will take others away without my even looking at them. Meaning, it's not going to ask you to look at every specific memory you're trying to heal. But you have to be willing to look at those memories. Now, hear what I just said. I didn't say, it's not contradicting. I'm saying you don't have to see everything that needs healed, but you have to be willing to. The theme to that, the undercurrent is, are you afraid of looking at any part of yourself? Because if you are, you should look at that. The Holy Spirit or God or Divine Mother isn't going to say, man, I got some doozies. You're going to freak out. So strap yourself down so you can't run from the room screaming. It doesn't do that. It's going to say, I'm going to just bring the stuff out, and you might not have to look at any of it. I kind of like that program, but it's going to have to say, but I do need you to admit, to own, that you have to be willing if I ask you to look at it, so that you'll say, whatever you want me to do, I will do. I will to do. And whatever you don't want me to do, I will not to do, right? So here I am. That's courage. It's a test, but it also can bring up, I'm scared. And then it'll say, all right, let's back off a little. It will honor where you're at. So that's it on the workbook lessons and the value of the workbook lessons. So the last thing, I'm not going to go through all the rest. I'm just going to cover just in a synopsis. The next section is on creating miracles, just reminding us what miracles are, the next section in the book. So it's worth checking out because miracles mean a shift in consciousness. But not just any shift, a shift from something more limited, problematic, traumatic, wounded, to healthy, healed, unlimited. Something human-ish to something divine-ish. That's kind of what a miracle is. But it's not just a miracle I get to manifest things I want, like things. It's really mostly supposed to be a focus in shifting consciousness. When you shift consciousness, you tend to get things anyway. Because your consciousness changes, your material things around you start to shift. If I shift from on a 0 to 10, if my consciousness is a 2 and I go to a 6, whatever was 2 level consciousness, like my car that's a 2, my partnerships that are a 2, often those things are going to go. Because I'm at a different frequency. You go, well, I mean, you're not so much at a different frequency that we can see you glowing. You can still drive this car just like that one. Believe it or not, vibration, compatibility, vibrational compatibility has a place. And some relations aren't going to match. Some things are not going to match. And you'll go, well, what happens? Yeah, sometimes they spontaneously combust, figuratively. It's there and now it's not. You don't know why, but a friend doesn't call anymore. Sometimes they manufacture a reason to not call. I don't like your new haircut. Don't talk to me. They'll just make up some ridiculous thing or fabricate some story about you, and you'll be like, but that's not true. Let me explain. They don't want to. Why? Because they don't know why, but they're done. They can't be compatible with you anymore, and it happens. It's confusing to our minds because we go, I'm still me, but you don't realize sometimes you're shifting vibrationally. Preferably up, obviously, than down. And then because creating miracles is one part of this, then there's a section called miracle mindedness, meaning how to get in the mindset to create a miracle. I'm not going to go into that, but I'm going to close now with, there's an exercise at the end of the chapter for how to create miracles. But the last part before we actually get into the 12 concepts is simply how to have a good day, a God day. So we close today with this, and we close the book section of the book with that before we launch into 12 principles and concepts with, this is as far as I go and I only watch the free presentation, let's end it with a bang. How to have a God day. So in the material, the summary is, we need to reconnect with God, Spirit, our Creator, more viscerally in our mind, body, and soul, to have a relationship. So, a simple way of doing this, and there's a quote from Isaiah that I shared, those who live in communion with God will live with renewed strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Meaning, when you plug into God, things go to a whole new level. You don't tire as much. You don't feel as uninspired. Things click. I think there's still frustrations at times, at least in my experience. I can be clicking a lot, but the world doesn't work sometimes at that pace. The world doesn't always go, oh wait, hold it everybody. Someone's feeling inspired. Let's all join with them. You can be totally inspired, and often the world is like, we're all in a sleep state. We don't even like inspirations. It's kind of annoying. When someone gets inspired, we have to start waking up. We just want to snooze a bit more. So the world doesn't always jump, at your inspirations and awakenings. So don't take it too personally, which you're going to do anyway, but try not to take it too personally. But having a God day comes from the following. 1, start the day with God. Here are the practical steps. Learn to say something along the lines of, I make no decisions alone today. Instead, I make them with God. It's a great affirmation, great prayer, great statement. I make no decisions alone today. Instead, I make them with God. Say it when you're in the shower or when you first open your eyes or when you're first waking with your eyes closed. Say it at the breakfast table. Say it as soon as you can. It's a great affirming. I'm not hoping, I'm affirming. I will make no decisions of myself. Instead, I'll make them with God. What that means is several things. In part, when it says I make no decisions alone, it means I will not make them from my lonely, fearful, limited, human, or ego-based self. Second half of the sentence, instead I make them with God. What decisions is it talking about? Well, any. Which car to buy, which freeway to take to work, whatever. But it starts with the most important decision every day is, who am I? That's a question nobody knows. You always ask that without knowing it, and the answer is never good. Who am I? Last time I checked, I've been married 5 times. None of my exes like me. The children won't speak to me. And I just took a cut in pay. That's who I am. And the universe then says, and so it is. Not so good. Have a good day. And they're like, whoa, let's move on to somebody else because, wow, this person's got it pretty bad. We don't realize that's how we go out our door every day. Every day we're asking, who am I? And then the who am I always answers itself with, therefore, what do I deserve? Who I am automatically will dictate what I deserve. So who am I? I ask the question and it's not a good answer. Even if I don't know I'm doing it, it's never a good answer on automatic. I have to make a conscious choice to get the right answer. The ego gets to answer automatically because that's the way we've designed ourselves today. We have to ask, wait a minute, I make no decisions from the ego self, meaning the ego has no say-so on who I am today. Instead, I make all my decisions with God, which means, God, you remind me who I am. What did I say naturally follows who I am? And what I deserve. So that's why you're really saying, God, instead of ego, you show me who I really am, and therefore what I deserve. And that's going to be good stuff. So, this prayer technically could also be split into 4 parts. I make no decisions alone today. I deny the effects of all my previous decisions I've made outside of the love of God. I choose God as my guide for today. I choose to make all my decisions with God. I now accept all the wonderful gifts that come to those who choose God as their guide. All that means is that I make no decisions alone today. Instead, I make them with God. 2 parts sentence, right? But each part of those 2 parts splits itself into 2. I make no decisions alone means, and whatever decisions I have made already affecting my day, I'm giving them up to God. And I deny their effects on me. Now I switch tracks to, and I'm choosing God. And that splits into 2 parts, which is, I'm choosing God as my guide, and I accept the gifts that come from choosing God as my guide. The 2 things I named that elaborated on the second part of the sentence were opposites of the first 2 parts. I make no decisions with God, with self, is the opposite of I make them with God. But the karmic crap that's coming into my life from having chosen to believe that I was less than God created me, I'm denying the effects of that, and the opposite is I'm welcoming in the gifts that come from choosing with God. You don't have to remember all that. Just go back to the sentence. I make no decisions alone. Instead, I make them with God. That's how to start the day. So it's start the day, throughout the day, and at the end of the day. That's how to have a God day. Start the day with God, continue the day with God, end the day with God. It may sound religious, and it's not. It may sound preachy, and it's not. This is a spiritual practice. It's very in line with New Thought, Buddhism, and many other things. So in addition to starting our day by connecting with God, we should realign every so often through the day. So let's say I did my morning exercise. I connected with God. But remember, every so often, random times of transition, like from work to home, home to work, or on an as-needed basis, meaning this. I started my day with God. Do you think that's always going to make everything stellar throughout the day? Could, but sometimes it won't. Sometimes I make no decisions alone. I make them with God. Now I feel all glowy and glittery. I feel buzzy. Man, this is amazing. And I don't even get out my house, and I trip over one of the kids' toys. You know, and you go nuts over it. You slipped. So what I would do is get out of the house, get in the car, and say, realign. Realign. What am I wanting again? God's presence. God's presence. God's presence. And then get in the car, which has a dead battery. Uh-oh. Dead, you know. Realign, realign. Your job is, no matter what's happening through the day, please remember to realign. God wants you to, we want you to, you want to. But you don't hear that calling for that because pain is in the way. So do it throughout the day. Lastly, end the day with God, just as you started it and continued. So no matter how well the day went, how often we remember to remain connected to God, we still need to end the day with God. And that usually means the day's coming to a close, you're lying down on your bed, you might be getting ready for sleep. Remember, give thanks for how the day went. When you give thanks for when you chose to realign with God, and forgive yourself for the times you didn't. End the day well. Don't let it end with, even the Old Testament tells us, try not to end the day with hatreds. Try not to end the day with unclosed conversations or whatever. Nothing like lingering, because you're just going to take it into sleep anyway, which means you're going to wake up with it anyway. So that's the same vibe's just going to sit there. So opening and closing the process. When our prayer time and silent time are complete, add some visualization to the process. So if you at the end of the day said, okay, I'm settling in, I'm going to now give thanks for the times I realigned with God. I see the times, yes, great, good job. That's righteous. I dig it. I'm glad that I did that. There's some times I slipped. What you could do now is, when did I slip? Well, there was that time when your sibling called, and as usual, God, their older brother, sister, they always tell you what to do, even now that you're 90. They're still doing it, so they're irritating. And so you got on the phone, you got triggered, and you said, we're not 5 anymore. Like, we're 90-something. So please stop telling me what to do. And they got mad, and you hung up on them. So what you do now is, instead of saying, you're a jerk, and hanging up, how might I have done it different? I hear what you're saying. Thanks for being there for me all those years. And I could also say other things like, and thanks for trusting me now to take care of myself. You notice that little hint? It's okay for you to do that. But when you're done, and you take care too, you picture it going differently so that it wires in here as though it did. You're going to create a miracle in your mind that wasn't there on the 3-dimensional level. But now it's there, more likely, because when it's in your mind, it can more likely manifest. Make sense? And last, in case of emergency. Still part of the closing the day, but in case of emergency. If at times we notice resistance to this choice for God as our guide, we're asked by Christ consciousness to at least acknowledge that our current state is not one of love, peace, joy, and abundance. You can be like, but they've been doing this all my life, my sibling. Okay. Would you like to do something about this? Fine. In case of emergency, are you feeling peaceful? No. Thanks to my sibling? No. Are you feeling peaceful? No. We also need to own that the current state might have been caused either by our not choosing our right guide or from our inaccurate perception of whatever was occurring. Okay, so in my opinion, my sibling's always been like that, so I'm mad and so on. But wait. Even the sibling thing is an illusion. I'm acting as though this person has power over me. They're just a person. They only have power that I have, on some level, helped them believe they have. And I don't have to do that. This then can lead to us admitting that we want another option and choosing to surrender to that other option. This isn't working. I don't dig the way this call went. I'm giving it to you, God. Now I'm going to ask you to take over and show me how it could have gone. And all we need is a little humility, and we can turn things around. This brings us to the popular course line. There is another way of looking at this or perceiving this, and I am determined to find that other way, because it's God's way. Make sense? So we've covered things like how this came about for me. We've talked about the metaphysics behind A Course in Miracles, these concepts in A Course in Miracles, how we came into this realm, how we're to emerge and ascend from this realm. We've talked about a little, here and there, projection and relation, why relationships are the key at the end of the day. Not because it's romantic relations, all relations, because we started with a relationship with God that's splintered. We end with our splintered relationships needing to be brought back to oneness. We started with one, we splintered now has to be brought back to one. How? By us healing our relationships with each other. So it's spiritual psychology, and psychology often includes the topic of relationships. And so this too, spiritual psychology includes relationships. And that's because not just we're going to heal relationships, we have to understand psychology. We have to understand we have stuff going on inside and we project it on each other. I transfer my good that I don't want to own. You are so good looking. You being in my life makes me feel so much better. That's not true. I'm transferring my own good that I could have onto you being the great looking one, the smart one, or whatever that I like having you in my life. That's projecting or transferring positives onto people. So clients do it to counselors and doctors all the time. You make me feel so much better. You love me more than my parents did. You love me more than I do. See, I'm denying my goodness, putting it on a counselor who has the ability to make me feel better. You heard me. You listened. My sibling, 90-year-old sibling doesn't. So we project these positives, and it's unhealthy. It's understandable, but it's unhealthy. But we also do the negatives. Shadow, dark parts of myself I don't want to own. I project them out, and you're the one who made me do this. You're the one who led me to being unhappy. You're the one who made me sick. I didn't have a cold. You gave me a cold. Those are projections. Because under even the simple thing as the cold, what really happens is, somewhere in my deep recesses, I have forgotten who I am. That is taking a toll on me, and it's weakening my immunity physically. Therefore, you came into the room and you had a little virus, and I couldn't fight it because I have no immunity because I forgot who I am. I don't want to think all that stuff Michael just said. Let me just say you gave me a cold. Well, you can. Look how much quicker it is. You gave me a cold. Versus, I seem to have a cold. But it's not real, so what does that mean? Cold seemed to be happening in my body, which is also not real. So what does that mean? This is a story. This is a mythology. This is a play. What's the moral of the story that I might learn from this? I had immunity because the fact is, if my immunity's up, I could not have caught the cold. So the real thing is my immunity, not your germ. My immunity was down. Why? Don't blame it on material things. Go deeper into the psyche and say, my immunity could only be down if my mind is down. You don't have to remember where your mind went down. All you have to know is, I'm going to own that it's a remote possibility that some part of me dropped in consciousness and allowed this to manifest as seemingly catching a cold, seemingly from you. Now I end it with, so sorry about that. That thing, even if I didn't say it to you, in my mind, I'm sorry to you for projecting you being the carrier of my illness. Sorry about that. My bad. That's what Ho'oponopono is, the Hawaiian prayer. Sorry about that. God, what was I thinking? I'm so sorry about that. I love you. I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry about that. I love you and thank you. It's reversing this projection and saying, oops, sorry about that. I really meant to love you. So let me let you off the hook and thank you for understanding this bizarre thing we just went through. Even though they don't even know and hear of this conversation, you're retiring people from having power that they don't have. Then you take it back here because that's part two. First I heal with you, then I go here. Now, Michael, let's have that conversation. Well, I thought we just healed it with them. Well, that was part one. Part two is now, why did you project it onto them? Well, because I didn't want to own that my own immunity was down, and maybe I wasn't being very loving, and that caused me to get stressed. And then when I got stressed, I ended up getting sick and blaming them. But really, it was my own lack of love and self-worth. Would you like to let that go? Yes. Okay, great. Just like we said to them. Sorry about that, Michael. Sorry about that, body. You're just a projection, something I projected onto. Sorry about that. Everybody's free. Recess. And so they're freed, I'm freed, and the third part of healing and forgiveness, after healing and forgiving them, and then after healing and forgiving yourself, is the recognition now we're done and no healing's left necessary. Heal with others, heal with self, and recognize nothing left to heal. And now you're back in God consciousness. Okay? So I pray this has made good sense. Remember, you can, if you're not already in the course, I know most everybody is, but a lot of people aren't, so you're welcome to still sign up. They offer discounts and all that sort of thing for signing up now, but sign up if you can. And if you don't have the time or whatever it is, get the book. It's all in there, a lot of it's in there. You don't get the spontaneous stuff, but you'll get the point. If that's all you can do, get the book. If you can't even afford the book, listen to the free talks. We try to make these things as available as possible in as many ways as possible. So start with that. Start with what you can get for free, and one day you'll get the book or something else, whatever. Talk to other friends. Read A Course in Miracles. There's all kinds of free things on the course. And again, this is not just a Course in Miracles talk. If you go listen to Kenneth Wapnick's YouTube, and there's not a lot of other people you hear me naming, there's a reason for that. Okay? So be careful what you're going to go and read and study. Don't assume because it says A Course in Miracles or Christ or love or God that it's great stuff. Wapnick, though, I've never seen anything of his that I went, oh, that one was a letdown. Brilliant. Humble, just a great energy dude. Passed away just a few years ago, but really wonderful energy. And check out his YouTube things, and you're going to find just epiphanies. Even if you never read A Course in Miracles, it's still like this. It's still truth. It's still spiritual. So he has things on reality and illusion or forgiveness or whatever it happens to be. And I have, boy, oh boy, it's a couple hundred now, free talks on YouTube on all these topics. So don't think you need to exclude yourself of being included in the course. Even if you can't do the course, check out the free things. Just do what you can to learn and grow and keep going. But remember, when we started a couple hours ago, underneath this book, this material, these teachings, there is a divine plan for the awakening, our remembrance of Christ consciousness, our remembrance of our divine self. That is a process we're in. It's not just a kind of a spiritual movement on the planet. It's kind of neat. It's kind of interesting. There is a divinely ordained process that involves everybody waking up. It's not just a neat, like spiritual topics coming out. It's not like, isn't that neat that we are learning new things all the time? That's just neat. I'm talking about underneath it all, God itself has willed that we awaken and is doing everything it can through teachers, teachings, and so on. The more conscious we are, the more participant we are in this. The more unconscious, the more we are not a participant so much. We'll be going marching or dragged one way or the other. Everybody's going to move with this. So just become excited about it and say, well, I believe there is this thing happening. There's an awakening process, and I want to be part of that. Step into it. Study the things that talk of that. Study the teachers, the teachings, whatever. Stay with things that move you in that direction, and bid farewell to things that don't, even if it's people. Make more efficient your path and make more insistent of the greatest good you can manifest. Okay? God bless you all. Join us when you can. 9:30 services, 9:45 services every Sunday. Friday night spiritual insights with Michael Mirdad. That's free as well. That's around 5:30 on, I think it is, on Fridays. So check out the free presentations and join us in online courses occasionally on Wednesday or whatever other opportunities you might have. All right? Excellent. Peace be with you all. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.